when you're making a decision in City Hall that really is only going to change the city 5, 10, 15 years down the line, you got to be thinking about what the young people want because we're the ones that are going to be around. But moreover than that, the young people in this community that were maybe a little bit um, disconnected from the greater Binghamton community in some ways. I think looking back, I did a lot to connect young people into the Binghamton community and just do what we could to bridge that gap.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast international DJ, house music producer, creative superstar, and someone I consider a friend, Conrad Taylor. Welcome, Conrad.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Please stop.
All right. So I saw a movie called We Are Your Friends with Zac Efron X years ago. That is or is not house music.
I've never seen that film.
Oh, no, really?
No.
Because it's like EDM. He talks about heart rates, and he's a DJ.
Cool.
There's Emily Ratajkowski, however you say her name, is involved. You have to see this movie, apparently, because this is like my major background. But how the heck does one become an international DJ?
That's a great question. So the way that I'm doing it, and there's a lot of different paths, but I'm doing it with no labels, no promoters, no producers, just a genuine desire to make people dance. So, we know each other from working together on both of your campaigns, but music has always been a huge part of my life. And this past year, I wanted to give that a shot professionally. So I came out with my first track, and people kind of liked it.
And then they just kept hitting play over and over again. And then you played it at some of the hottest clubs in New York, and everyone starts screaming and dancing. And then you come out. That's pretty much the way it went down, right?
It wasn't quite that romantic, but I was definitely taken aback by how many people did genuinely enjoy it. And this is just something that I'd worked on for a few months and tweaked and fine-tuned.
So I'm no house music connoisseur, but Evelyn and I loved it and played it over and over again, and our kids loved it. You're something of a musical prodigy. You grew up here in New York City. You got into LaGuardia Performing Arts School, which is the fame school that all of the celebrities ended up going to. And you had a choice between that school and like a more normal school. How old were you when that went down?
So I was in 8th grade, and I don't know how many people know much about the New York City high school admissions process.
But I'm in my 40s, so everyone my age knows fame. I want to live forever.
Yeah. I know that.
So that high school is LaGuardia High School, so I call it the fame school. And to get in is very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. You have to be an extraordinary performer. When you got in for vocals and acting? Yeah. So then at this point, there was a bit of a fork in the road. And where were your parents on this?
My parents were supportive of me. I mean, I had done some acting work as a child. I was in the Metropolitan Opera here at Lincoln Center and some commercials. But I was also academically and politically oriented as a student and as a child. So like this was the really the first moment in my youth where I had to make a genuine decision between life paths. And I ended up choosing to go to this school, shout out Bard High School Early College. It's a public school on the Lower East Side where you graduate with an associate's degree at the end of your 4 years, which is a really cool thing for a public school in New York City to offer. But that was sort of this I want to focus on
serious stuff.
Exactly. Which now I've made that transition from politics back into music. But these are sort of the two loves of my life that I've danced with almost.
You can come back again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
You can do it.
I would like to get big enough as an artist where I could sort of reintegrate myself into politics in a new way because I've worked on campaigns. I've been an elected official
Oh, you've
myself.
definitely. Oh, yeah. So so the story of how you became an elected official is so epic and fascinating. Where you became the youngest elected official in the country at the
At the
time
time, yeah.
as a college student. So you come out of high school, you go to State University of New York, Binghamton, where I had a lot of friends who went. It's the flagship state university here in New York, and you run for city council of Binghamton.
Yeah, I was 18 years old and I'd gotten just ultra involved in the community, like for a number of reasons. When I got to college, I was just so excited to be independent, which I think a lot of people experience when they first go to college away from their hometown,
Yep.
which is just like you just want to make this new place your home. And I was very passionate about doing that. So I got involved with local campaigns and politics and volunteer activities and student clubs even and stuff like that. And I was learning about all these local issues and knocking on doors for a candidate. And this one woman who I actually got kind of close with when knocking on doors for this candidate was like, "You should be the one running for city council, not any of these other career
You know, the
politicians."
same thing happened to me when I was, supporting some other presidential candidates. Someone was like, "You should be the one running for president." That actually didn't happen. That never
But
happened.
that may as well.
No, no, it totally didn't happen. But in your case, it did happen, and then you were like, "Maybe I
I was
should."
like, naive 18-year-old Conrad was like, "Yeah, I could do that," and I felt like very genuine about it, which in some ways only like an 18-year-old young person can feel that like genuine idealism,
Yep.
you know? So I did, and we ended up um, building a massive operation in Binghamton, like something that could rival any congressional campaign in the country.
So at this point, when you run, you're a sophomore?
No, I was a freshman. The election was when I was a
Sophomore,
sophomore
you
the
showed
first
up. I
semester.
got you. So, okay, I get it. I get it. You're a freshman in college. You're
Mhm.
like, you know what? I'm going to run for city council, and then you rally a bunch of other freshmen, presumably, and say, "Hey guys, I'm going to do this thing." Uh, now, this seems frankly extraordinarily difficult to impossible because the folks who vote in these elections are not going to be the college students. It's going to be Binghamton locals, and there is an incumbent, I imagine.
Yeah. So I ended up beating the old Republican council president, who famously at the mayor's State of the City 2 weeks before my election, I overheard him talking about how he was gonna like I'm gonna crush this kid. I remember hearing that and being like, oh,
and,
okay.
and he had a disparaging nickname for you, and what was that?
Comrade Toddler.
Which I thought was pretty clever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yet you still prevailed by knocking on everyone in the district's door multiple times.
That was certainly one of our strategies. So I would say that when I announced my candidacy, if the election had been the next day, I would have lost by like 80% of the vote.
Sure.
I mean, I was this out of town kid
Yep.
with no political experience. The argument against me was very strong,
No
but
one knows who you
no one
are.
knows who I am. Like, what do I stand for? I mean, the list goes on, but I really spent every minute for the next 10, 11 months demonstrating to the people of my district why they could, I guess, trust me to do a good job.
Including
So,
that summer, I assume.
yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I walked around and knocked on every single door in my district at least 3 times. I had 100 plus volunteers working on my campaign. I had a campaign staff. We were raising money. We treated this with the seriousness it deserves, and
How
I
many doors were in the district?
9,000
So
maybe.
we're talking about 27,000 door knocks in the space of 11
Yeah,
months.
I mean, not all of those were registered voters. I would have to find the numbers, but it was a lot of doors for sure. Yeah.
So you looked at it and said, "I'm going to knock on these doors." And when people saw you the second or third time, they must have been like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah, I mean, I was having tea and coffee in, like, people's kitchens and living rooms and really, like, diving deep about, not just, like, political issues, but also, like, their lives and,
Sure.
like, what I mean, I look at politicians now, and, I mean, it's one of the reasons that I was so enamored with you as a candidate for president. It's like, it's so hard when you've been in that position to, like, look at someone and be like, "Are you genuine? Like, are you real?" Like, especially now where I feel like I'm more jaded than I have been about politics and politicians in general. Um, but yeah, I mean, I really experienced what it was like to sit with someone and then to actually eventually get into a position where you can do something to change their life, which
So
was
you win that race,
yeah.
and were you surprised?
I was not surprised by the time that we won because I knew that we earned it and
And
deserved
what's
it.
that? What was that vote count?
We beat him by 10%. So it was
Wow,
55-45, which is not bad.
that's
Um,
pretty much a landslide if you were
it's
challenging an incumbent and the rest of
yeah,
it.
it felt that way, certainly. Um,
So then you become a city council person in Binghamton, and you're a college sophomore. Is that a paid position?
yeah. I mean,
So
it's
dope.
not full-time. It's, like, treated as kind of you get a healthy stipend, I would call it. Like, it's not like here in New
Wow.
York City where you get, like,
And
160 grand or something a year. That would've been crazy. 19-year-old college kid. But yeah, what?
yeah. So you win. Everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, you did it." Do you get a lot of press?
Yeah, locally, certainly. I mean, I don't know what I know now about PR and national I think at the time I could have gotten national press for it, but I didn't
That
really
wasn't
know
your
how to do
focus. You didn't have the
that.
team. Sure, you were just a college kid
Um
upstate.
Yeah. But locally, it was a big deal, and there are just, like, a few accomplishments that came with it that I was I think, like, people at my school were very dubious at first, but ended up being quite proud because we were able to increase young turnout of young people by 900% in the district, and we defined that as folks 26 and under, I think is how we defined it. Um which is a lot, but we still would have won even without those people, which was also meaningful. So it was like this, in a lot of college towns, although I see it as Binghamton as a city is much, much more than that. But in what people sometimes view as college towns, there's that like
Town gown.
town gown
Sure, of
divide.
course.
And this was a really important step, I think, in bridging that from both directions because first of all, it showed that like, young people have a seat at the table in our communities, regardless of where we are. Um, when you're making a decision in City Hall that really is only going to change the city 5, 10, 15 years down the line, you got to be thinking about what the young people want because we're the ones that are going to be around. But moreover than that, the young people in this community that were maybe a little bit um, disconnected from the greater Binghamton community in some ways. I think looking back, I did a lot to connect young people into the Binghamton community and just do what we could to bridge that gap.
Hey YouTube, glad you're enjoying the podcast. If you really like it, hit subscribe, and then YouTube will notify you every time we have a bang up new guest. Thank you. So you're a city council person. Um, but one of the fun projects you got involved with is you started a projection festival where they would light up the exteriors of buildings with these timed displays. I got the term wrong. What are they called?
Yeah, I didn't start it, but certainly like developing downtown was a huge part of what I was focused on city council. And the two co-founders, Josh and Tice, launched what's called the Luma Projection Arts Festival. So the term that you're looking for is projection mapping.
That's it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So shout out to Luma, lumafestival.com. It is one of the coolest things that you will probably ever experience if you go to it. The buildings come alive, like, City Hall turns into a spaceship and
So Google Conrad Taylor music and then Google projection mapping.
right, right.
Those are a couple things
we
that
got some
will
we got some action items.
yeah, that will wow you. And you shared some stories with me about being on city council. There was one where a local reporter used to show up and then they stopped showing up, and then all of a sudden things were a little bit less buttoned up after the local press stopped
Yeah.
appearing at these meetings.
Well, on the presidential campaign and on the mayoral campaign, you spoke a lot about the importance of local journalism and independent journalism. And it was one of the things that drew me to you back on the presidential because, politicians don't often talk about this topic. And the reason for that is because I experienced it. I was um, the youngest person on city council by far, but I was also for a lot of the time the only Democrat, and it just created a lot of scenarios where um, sometimes I felt like just stuff wasn't getting done on the council, and like you were just saying, when there was a reporter there, at least one, the meeting was an entirely different meeting. Like, no one here watches their city council meetings on TV, like their Spectrum TV, or no one watches it online. No one goes, you know. But if there's someone reporting on it, then people in the community have sometimes a genuine idea of what's happening in their
Or
local
at least
government.
if you were one of the members, you'd be much more buttoned up. Because like, oh shit, my stuff could get recorded.
Exactly. So I felt like whenever a reporter was there, just more would get done. And we'd have better like conversations about helping people in our community. And the difference was drastic. And it shows me just how important political accountability is. And despite the experiences that we have had with certain journalists and certain outlets, and I mean, you know,
Well, I find local news to be less ideological, more up the middle. I mean,
right.
you can't really. I mean, the void gets filled, unfortunately, with cable news and nationalized ideological squabbles and Facebook feeds and the rest of it. So I mean, like you said, I mean, we're connected on this, but you were one of the people that let me know. It's like, hey, it's not made up. I mean, this shit is exactly real life.
It's so real. It's so real. And I mean, like, kudos to the journalists and stations in America that prioritize their local councils and governments, because I think it makes a huge difference in what actually gets done for taxpayers and for voters and for
Well,
people.
kudos to them if they're still doing it, because I think that the
Right.
number is that I think something like 60,000 journalists lost their job over the last several years, et
Yeah.
cetera. So you're this young rising superstar in the Democratic Party. You get to introduce Bernie at a rally upstate, right?
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, that was sick. Go Bernie.
Yeah, I mean that. Like I was a burner in 16 before I ran. At least I mean, I get the text to prove it.
We all do.
We all do. So you have a choice to make at a certain point because your term is up, but you could run again. You could run for state rep seat, and then you decide to make something of a dramatic shift, and you show up in Iowa to work on the Andrew Yang campaign. Like, what was the next step after city council, and how close were you to running for a legislative seat?
Yeah, yeah, there were a lot of people pressuring me to do different things and make different decisions, running for mayor,
Oh shit! You
running
could have run for
for
mayor.
for Congress even.
Yeah, why not?
And this is all stuff that I was considering. why did I make the decision that I did? There's two
Aside
main.
from the fact that I'm awesome.
Well,
Continue.
that's number one. Number two and three. Well, actually, that's part of number. That's part of one of them. So the first thing is that I got into politics to stop the endemic of career politics. That was part of my message. I felt like a hypocrite becoming a career politician. I really
Interesting.
did. And I actually think career politics is very dangerous. I think that um, anything that is a career has inherent self-interest baked into it.
You know, one thing I don't like that I have a feeling you don't like and most Americans don't like is that whenever someone leaves office, there's like a feeding frenzy of officials at the
Oh
level
my
below them being
God.
like,
It's my
"Oh,
turn. It's my turn.
yeah, it's my turn. It's my turn." Everyone's looking around, being like, "Oh, whose turn is it? Is it
Yeah.
their turn? Is it your turn?" And it just seems like such nonsense. It's like, so you have like a bizarre career ladder trajectory,
Yeah.
and that's how we decide who the heck should be. I mean, you can see this at every level, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So I didn't really want to be a part of that. And yeah, I feel like public service just can't have that inherent selfishness that is attached to a career. And that doesn't mean that there aren't incredible public servants who are career politicians
Yep.
who are doing it for the right reasons. But part of building a career is making decisions about your career and climbing the ladder. And I just didn't want to do that because I wanted to stay in politics for the right reasons, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
So I had some time to make some genuine reflections about what was currently motivating me politically, because I knew I didn't want to leave politics at the time. It was all that I really thought about. Um, and for me, that was defeating Donald Trump. I was, I saw, even in local politics, the drastic change in how certain conservatives operated post Trump. Like, I think like a lot of casually racist remarks were a lot more common. Um, Sort of carelessness about fact was a lot more common.
Yeah, he had a profound cultural impact on people say he normalized things that previously would not have been in the bounds.
100%. So I was seeing this local impact on the Trump era, but of course, just nationally, it
I
was
got
a
into the same reason, man.
disaster.
I was like, Trump's a giant red flag. What the heck are we gonna do? Uh, the economy's transforming. Like, there are only a few things I can see that might fix it. I'm gonna run for president and try
Yeah.
and I always said Trump was not the disease; he's a symptom of a disease that's getting worse. Which, by the way, is still true. Still going on.
100%. And I mean, honestly, like, this goes back to you being awesome. Is
Oh,
that
thanks, man. I was
I
kidding, but
did
thank
think that
you.
you were the antidote. I genuinely did. I was on council at this time, and I'm very proud of a lot of things that I got done, but I'm also very disappointed about a lot of things that I didn't. And part of why those things maybe didn't come to fruition was my inability to connect with more conservative minded people
Interesting.
and convince them, essentially. And I saw this divide just getting greater and greater in our country. I knew that I was not special in feeling this way. And I saw you as literally one of the only people that could fucking do it.
Well, and Binghamton, so people know, upstate New York is a fairly reddish area. You said that you were one of the only Democrats on council.
Yeah, it's pretty split at this time. I think there was a bit of a red wave in Binghamton that I was able to fight against. The city itself is pretty split. Even leans blue sometimes during.
Purplish. Well, it's a
Yeah,
college town too. College
totally,
towns tend to be bluish, but then generally speaking, upstate New York is
absolutely. Yeah,
red and would be quite Trumpy.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I went for Trump. I think upstate New York went for
So
Trump.
you would be living the divide in a way that most of us were not. And I was trying to heal the divide and bridge the
Exactly.
gap.
So I was like, I'm gonna fight against Trump, and I'm gonna do that by helping Andrew Yang win.
If you know me, you know that I think that our data should be ours, and that big tech right now is running roughshod on our autonomy, our agency, our privacy for sure. One way to help turn the tables on big tech is to use ExpressVPN like I do when I surf the web. It keeps you private by piping you in to another IP address. It's what big companies use. It was rated the #1 VPN, that's virtual private network, by CNET, Wired, and more. Let's take it back from big tech. Stop handing over your personal data to the quasi-monopolies that mine our activity and sell our info for their profit, not ours. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep me and mine safe online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's expressvpn.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. expressvpn.com/yang to learn more. So how the heck do you get a job on my campaign? Because I will say from my vantage point, I'm just like, campaigning in where do we meet? New Hampshire, Iowa?
We met in Iowa.
Yeah, so I'm on the
Who
road in
knows?
Iowa. And then it's like, hey, this is Conrad. He's on the advanced team. He's gonna be helping you out. And I was like, Conrad, eh? And then someone had given me a couple of your stats ahead of time, being like, he's a stud. He's the youngest elected official in the country. He's can do and the rest of it. I was like, oh, I'm sure I'll like him. And then I met you and did like you. But I have
I remember that. Sorry to interrupt you. I remember that the first time that I met you, you were, and you did this a lot. You were like, I was like dropping you off at your hotel room because like you don't know where in the world you are. You're like, here, this is where you're sleeping tonight.
Yeah.
And then you're like, nice to meet you. Would you like a picture with me? And I was like, sure.
Well, because I don't know if I'm going to see you
Yeah,
again.
and
I don't know what's going on.
It was like it was just such a funny little anecdote about how crazy things were for you during that time. Where
Yeah, no, thank you, man. I was trying to be considerate. I don't know who I'm going to see.
Yeah, I was like, wow, I can't believe he asked me that. And I think a lot of people took note. You were always trying to make sure that the people that work for you felt appreciated.
Well,
Which was
I
awesome.
felt shitty that I didn't know the team members better, because when I ran an organization or a company, I made it my business to know people well. But
Totally.
when you're a presidential candidate, you're like you said, it's like, get in this vehicle.
You're
He's
just
gonna
trying to
take
breathe,
you-
man.
He's gonna take you here, and I'm like, who's this? Could be a volunteer, could be an advanced staffer,
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be an Uber driver. I don't fucking
Right.
know. So how easy or hard was it to get that job?
It was a presidential campaign, so it certainly wasn't easy. But for me, I think I had an interesting resume.
Yeah, I'll say.
And then I knew somebody that worked on the campaign who was able to vouch for me as well.
Oh, really? Who was
Yeah,
that?
that was Annie.
Oh, dope.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember her, but
All right, so you show up in Iowa, and what month is that?
that was in November.
Wow. So that's November 2019.
2019.
And so you have like the 3 months that were the most high energy and hectic.
Yeah.
And you didn't just hang out in Iowa, because you advanced us all over the place.
all
so
over
you
the
land in
place.
Iowa, and then we went.
All over New Hampshire, Washington, California.
Oh, there was a
Nevada.
presidential debate in December.
Yeah.
Did you staff that thing too?
Yeah, for a little bit.
Those are
South
good times.
Carolina.
Oh, shit.
I like to think that when I joined, I mean, this like Shelby. Shout out to Shelby and Ethan for being incredible. But I do like to think that when I joined, we were able to elevate like the level of the on the ground events and
when I showed up, it just leveled up the whole operation.
I like to think that I helped.
Well, I will say Conrad is excellent at making things better and more professional in terms of staging and whatnot. I mean, like your attention to detail is very, very high. Energy level is super high. And what people don't know is that advanced staff need to be freaking indefatigable machines or warriors. Like, like, I mean, my hours are bad, and like you're like doing stuff beforehand, like
Well, if we
showing up to
mess
the
up,
thing.
you end up in the wrong city. So
Or I go to a place for speaking, and there's like a stage and a backdrop and people and a photo op and the rest of it. And and then I leave, and then someone's like wrapping all that stuff up. And sometimes they're like taking the same side and like trying to get ahead.
yeah, yeah. We got to beat the bus.
Gotta beat the
I
bus.
got a few speeding tickets on that campaign, but
But what a journey those few months were between November and February.
oh my god,
Yeah. I mean, what are your strongest or fondest memories?
there's so many. I was really proud of. So we qualified for that December
California
debate
debate,
in
LA, right?
California, and you crushed that. You crushed that debate. It must have been one of your best, if not your best.
I think it was my best.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there was a moment when we were like, okay, and that was certainly around then. And then we went into Iowa feeling maybe better than we've ever felt, and then you like scored really well in like 9 polls, and then but in a week, and the 4 that you didn't score that well in were the ones that like would have qualified you for the January debate in Iowa. So you were like 1 poll short. We didn't qualify for the Iowa debate. That was a big sting for us and for our momentum that we were building. We had just gotten a great fundraising quarter. It was just not what we deserved, I think. And not what the Yang Gang deserved, honestly, to not qualify for that debate. Because it wasn't indicative of the momentum we were building at
Yeah,
all.
yeah, we were having a good run.
We were having a good run.
And then immediately afterwards, a poll came out with me
Precisely.
at that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, so we were, in Iowa HQ thinking, what are we going to do to demonstrate that this isn't indicative of that, and that we're one of the big players, which we were. So basically, it was, I had the idea essentially to do a massive rally, biggest rally we've ever done, the night before the debate, when all of the reporters were already in town, national reporters, on your birthday. We would make it like basically our biggest event yet in Iowa. Hopefully, as many reporters as possible. And that's the plan that we ended up executing. And it was my event that I built, and it was definitely one of the proudest moments for me on the presidential campaign, because I felt like that event just went so well. We had like 1,000 people there.
I remember that night. I
Yeah.
remember the happy birthday song, which I appreciated. I just celebrated Yang Week with some folks online. And this was when people from all over the country descended on Iowa to
Yeah.
campaign. And wow, did that bring back some memories. I mean, that
I can
was
only imagine.
that was a very special time for all of us.
Yeah, it really felt that way. And that entrepreneurial spirit that you had, and then everyone else who supported you had, lives on now. It lives on with my decision now to like do music. And
It's one reason why you are such like an energizing, invigorating presence, and DJ, by the way. You can like make the people move and whatnot. But you're the sort of person that formed the core of the Yang Gang. Really, is like people who just think that good things are possible, and it did feel like that in Iowa. I remember that
Mhm.
vividly. Like where we went, there's just so much energy around us. We spent whatever it was, like $7-8 million on TV ads just in Iowa. So
Yeah.
turn on the TV and there
Totally.
was a lot of this guy. Uh, and falling short in Iowa was really hard. I spoke at one of the events that night, and I had a sinking feeling you go in because like there are all these signs for the other candidates, and then there was like the Yang pocket, but it was a pocket. It wasn't like a
Yeah.
it wasn't a majority by any means. And so I was like, uh-oh, this is indicative. And it was a pretty big site. So I was like, well, this isn't going to be an anomaly. I'm a math
Right.
guy. So it's like the odds of that were pretty low.
Yeah.
And so, that was a tough night. and then we immediately had to go to New Hampshire, which you were part of as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, we were, like, in the process of losing Iowa, and that was also a crazy night because the ballots weren't being
Yeah, I
counted
mean,
right or
how do you feel about the fact that the Dems are kicking Iowa to the curb?
as someone who was very witness to the nonsense that was the
It was
2019 or
tough.
2020 Iowa caucus, I mean, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for Iowa and Iowans. It was a quintessential purple state 12 years ago. Obama won it in the general, and then now it's Republican plus 9. And the Democratic Party is essentially giving up on it, saying like you're too rural, too white, too Midwestern. We're out. And I think it's just a terrible message. It makes me sad as someone who spent a lot of time in Iowa.
Mm.
By the way, the same dynamics playing out in Ohio, even, which used to be quintessential purple and is now plus 8 or 9 red. And Tim Ryan, I thought, ran a great campaign, and he still loses by whatever it was, 7 points to
Yeah.
a candidate who, in my opinion, was not good at all
No.
in the form of J.D. Vance. I mean,
No.
that dude. And that dude only got 32% of the Republican primary. So it just goes to show you, like, weak Republican, strong Democrat, they still lose the general by 7 or so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the National Democratic Party is going to be like, well, we'll just trade Ohio and Iowa in for Arizona and Nevada or Virginia or something and call it a day. Meanwhile, all the Dems of Iowa, who you and I spent all this time with, and Ohio will be like, what the heck happened to us?
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah.
I've always been a mattress guy. It's one reason I'm so thrilled that this podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. Helix Sleep is the future of mattresses. You take the Helix Sleep quiz at their website and get your perfect mattress fit in under 2 minutes. It takes a little longer for them to get that to your door, but when they send it to your door, you get a 100-night free trial. I know, it's crazy. That's over 3 months. And then over a 10-year warranty to try out your new Helix mattress. It's become the go-to mattress for my kids in the house, and they have a few mattresses to choose from, but they just always seem to find this one. You don't need to take my kids' word for it. It's also the #1 mattress pick by Wired, GQ. Imagine that job, just trying out mattresses for magazines, but it's #1. And it's #1 for a reason. Helix is offering up to 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now.
So then I drop out in New Hampshire. It's a very emotional time, and then fly to Nevada to thank people. I just found out the other night when I was reminiscing with folks that there were people that were in New Hampshire that wanted to see me that I like didn't come out for because I didn't know they were there. I mean, I was like I'd addressed people, and then I was in the back trying to figure things out. So that made me feel I missed that or let some people down. But then you and I campaigned down in Georgia later that year for Senators Warnock and Ossoff.
And made cash relief a reality before that, too.
Made cash relief a reality. Like, we did all this stuff in 2020, which was a weird time. And then you become one of the key people on the mayoral campaign, which makes sense because, as you can tell, Conrad's a New Yorker. And so he's like, we're going to do this. And
it went great.
Yeah. Conrad elevated our operations there too. No, so that was a tough time in New York. It was a tough race.
Yeah.
This is just a lot of struggling humans. A lot of
we encountered many.
And I felt the worst for you because I think
back at you, man.
because Conrad literally got physically accosted multiple times that I can remember. And I felt so bad. So like when things were going poorly in a particular event or gathering, Conrad was the person who would essentially have to like intercede to help or whatnot. And so I felt so bad for you, man. It's like as you remember that time on the Staten Island ferry where like the guy attacked the photographer.
Oh my God, of course.
And so that was one of the
when
times
you
where
saved him. that was
one of the times where I was the intervener. And in some ways, that's even more comfortable for me than being like the guy who they're people are trying to protect, and then someone else is intervening on my behalf. Like it
I'm
makes me
not
feel
I'm not
bad.
much of a bodyguard type. I don't know if you can tell on
He's
camera.
a lover, not a fighter. He's an artist. But that Staten Island ferry, when so in that case, I would just noticed like a guy's freaking assaulting someone. So I jump out of my
Yeah.
seat and go, holy cow, and intervene. And then happily the guy recognized me and then stands down,
Yeah,
chills out.
that was
But you know
good.
that guy ended up hospitalizing someone else
Yeah.
2 or 3 weeks later.
I think it was an Asian American
It
too.
was an elderly Sri Lankan man.
Yeah.
Made me feel terrible. I mean, obviously
What
we weren't people who could decide that whether you're
Yeah.
going to arrest the guy based on,
Yeah.
it's like we brought the police in and then they,
No, we saw some darkness during those few months. It was a tough time for New Yorkers, especially when we got into the race. I mean, it was the deep of winter. It was when Omicron was like at its height at the beginning of 2021, and I was really proud of the like lightness and hope that we brought to that race at the time. You know, the economic message, the like for a while we were the only people actually going out there and like meeting
that's
people,
true. It was a virtual
which kind of
campaign
screwed
until we
you and
got there.
me, kind of, but um it was worth it because we got to actually connect and inspire a little bit.
We got more individual donations than any candidate in the history of New York City.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of people that were excited, didn't go our way. And so then when we came off of that, you went to unwind. And I went to unwind, honestly. So in my
No,
case,
you wrote a book, but
so,
fine.
so I'll tell you the story. Actually, I don't know how much of this you knew in the mayoral. So, so I finished the book at the very end of 2020,
Right.
and then conclude it's like, oh, the two-party system not working, so I
Right.
should do something about that. But then no talk about that until after the mayoral, and so then the book comes out, and I'm then touring nationally and doing. But thank you for everyone who came to the book tour. Like, loved meeting people, and I will say to you on like that, if I hadn't had that book launch and book tour scheduled for the fall, I'm not sure if I would have like gotten back out there in that time
Mhm.
frame, because after the mayoral, I was like, I need a freaking vacation.
Yeah, and you didn't really get much of it, I feel like.
Yeah, I didn't because of the way the timeline worked. Like I
Yeah.
came off the mayoral and then I had to call my publisher and they were like, we want to publish this book as soon as possible. And I was like, what the heck does that mean in terms of date? They were like October 5th. And I said, all right, I can be ready October 5th. And
Right.
then when October 5th came around, did I feel ready to energize? Like not particularly. But
Yeah.
just like get back on the horse.
But yeah, for me, it went in a different direction, and I had the luxury to be able to go a different direction. I didn't have the weight of an entire nation on my shoulders. But um, yeah, I reconnected. I mean, we talked about this at the beginning of my podcast, which is like my story is a bit of a story of you know politics and public service, but also of music and the arts, and I kind of reconnected with that side of myself, and especially my love for electronic music, and really got in. I mean, I'm a German American, so I have German citizenship. I speak the language. Spent some time in Germany and in Spain and
The house music capital of the world.
Berlin, baby.
The
Techno, I think they would probably say, but
techno music capital of the world. That
yeah.
computes.
It is actually house and techno are from the U.S., like from Detroit and Chicago, which is really cool.
Shout out
Some people
Detroit.
don't know that, which is sick. Shout out Detroit. But yeah, so I reconnected with that, released my first song, started getting offers to DJ some places, and
Yes.
have been incredibly fortunate to DJ at some of the coolest spots here in New York City and build a bit of a following. And I mean, I think of like my happiest moments of 2022. They are all behind the decks, creating just an experience for people on the dance floor. It just brings me so much happiness and joy to be able to do that. it's almost like my new public service in a lot of ways.
You can see it, man. I mean, I've been there personally, and I've also seen the videos, and you are so pumped to get other people pumped. It's
Yeah,
really beautiful.
it's like it's so cathartic for me actually. Uh and I mean I only want to grow that from here. I have a real vision for like just a revolution on the dance floor. But what I mean by that is like I think a lot of people when they think about going out to the club or something similar, they think of high drink prices, they think of standing in line, they think of music maybe that they don't really wanna listen to. I mean, you can get darker with it too, and you can think of, like, being inappropriately touched, or you can think of being unsafe, having your drink spiked, this is, could be much worse, these thoughts if you're someone who identifies as a woman. So, I think that there is room for a revolution here about like creating a much safer, much more inclusive dance floor where you just like, and you see this a lot more in Europe, where you just go to vibe and be and have a meditative almost experience, a cathartic experience, to reconnect with yourself, to build community. Like, right now, a lot of DJs that you see come out of a come out of, like, Greek culture in the US, which is not, like, Greek as in Greece, Greek as in fraternities and sororities, and I know some awesome, awesome DJs that come out of this, like, Greek to DJ pipeline, but, and feel free to
It's not the vibe that you just described.
it's not the vibe that I just described, and it's not just not that vibe, it's actually, in a lot of circumstances, like a dangerous vibe.
Wow,
And
that
what I
sounds
mean
cool.
by that is like fraternities and sororities, and I think this might piss a lot of people off right now, but they create oftentimes really, really unsafe spaces to party
I
in.
just saw a documentary to this effect, and I know what you're talking about. I think most people do.
Yeah, it upholds like this culture of rape, misogyny, that actually goes to a lot of our American systems. This podcast, Snapped, which my sister makes because she has had some really dark experiences in this space, talks about this a lot more. But like Congress is majority fraternity and sorority. And again, I know so many amazing people that come from this space, but the culture that is being created is not one of safeness, inclusivity, fun in the way that
Is there a term for this more positive version of EDM gathering?
I can't.
Because you should coin this term. And what you just described reminds me of Howard Schultz going to, I believe, Italy and seeing this little cafe and being like, oh, they do coffee in a more elevated way. And then he comes back and popularizes it via Starbucks. I feel like you had like a different type of experience. You're like, ooh, I should popularize this in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also don't want to take away from um like this already is a thing. You have incredible spaces in New York City alone that are mostly in Brooklyn that embody this same kind of atmosphere and vision. Um, like house music comes out of Detroit and Chicago, which is where this started. This kind of feeling. But with that being said, I think we have to push back in that direction and with a lot more learned.
Well, your music is very, very feel good. Everything I've heard of yours, it has like this jubilance that I feel like would lead people in a positive direction.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I've got a lot more coming out this year with that same feeling in mind, just like, feeling the beat and feeling good. And
Joy.
yeah, yeah. And so, follow me on Spotify, Conrad Taylor, if you're
Follow
willing.
Conrad Taylor on Spotify. Check out a couple of his songs just now. I pretty much guarantee that you will at least be tapping your feet or doing something physical. It'll put a smile on your face. And uh, you're both very advanced and also just getting started. It's really a joy for me to see. And most people wouldn't have the courage to do pretty much half the things you just described that you've already done by the ripe old age of 26. I mean, when I have young people ask me about how to get involved in various ways, uh, I don't say, "Hey, run for office," because that seems like a bridge too far, though, apparently not. I mean, do it. But what I do say is, like, find a campaign you're excited about and go in and
Mhm.
contribute. And then if you're good, you'll get a lot of responsibility because you and I both know, like, good people are hard to find. And
Totally.
so if you're
Yeah.
good, you'll get stuff. And you wound up with an incredible amount of responsibility because you're excellent. And so I see in you someone who actually took the advice that I give to young people sometimes. But now you're applying your passions in this new direction that speaks to who you are and will give people also the same sense of optimism and joy that you want them to feel. It's really inspirational.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so, and I hope to continue growing with that exact philosophy in mind. It's impossible to not be in this position where you're like just getting started as an artist and seeing some small levels of success. Like your visions of grandeur are large. Maybe they're delusions of grandeur, but I certainly
Not
just
at all, man. I mean, you're a talented, hardworking person.
so if you want to be part of this journey, I would love that. Follow me on Instagram at Conrad.Taylor. Same thing on TikTok, Twitter, uh, Spotify is just Conrad Taylor. I've got big things coming, and I would love for everyone here to be a part of it.
Would love to be a part of it, brother. And I can't wait to keep track of your journey, Conrad. You're on your way.
Thanks, man.